everyone, Happy New Year. I'm back here at the back of the house today waiting on Barbara to come and do the music chat today. And we're going to be talking about Auld Lang Syne, a famous New Year song steeped in Scottish tradition, as you know. And I'm going to start the chat today while I'm waiting on Barbara to come by opening up the back door all the way to let the old year out, which, as you know, this year we really need to do that for sure. Old, new year out. This is a big Scottish tradition to do this. And in a few minutes when she gets here, I'll be opening up the front door to let the new year in. And Barbara will be the first person to cross the threshold here at the house as my first guest. She will be the first stepper into the house, Scottish tradition. And I'm sure she'll be bearing gifts of some sort for me. As is the Scottish tradition at New Year's, to be the first stepper into your neighbor's house and bear gifts and bring them good luck for the new year. So I'll come over to the front door and be back with you as soon as Barbara gets here. So I'm here at the front door, and sadly we're still in the pandemic, so I have to greet her with my mask on. But I did see Barbara coming up the walk, so I'm going to let her in. I'm going to open up the door and let the new year in, and she's going to be my first stepper across the threshold in the new year to bring us good luck. There she is. Hey, Barbara. Welcome. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Some cookies for you.
Yay. Wonderful.
You're welcome.
Some cookies for the new year to bring in the good luck.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to the deck so we can talk about Auld Lang Syne.
I will love to do that.
All right, let's go. Welcome back, everybody, to the deck in the back for our New Year's chat about Auld Lang Syne. I'm here with Barbara, and we've been happily researching this, I have to say.
Yep.
It was fun to find out the history of this song that we so strongly associate with New Year's, and I'm sure a few days ago you all were trying to sing it and remember the lyrics like everybody else. But we're going to just kind of go back in time and talk about where it got its start, how the melody and the text kind of came together. And some, one famous guy for sure you'll recognize, and I think Barbara knows all about him. We'll let her
No,
start
I don't know all about it, but I certainly enjoyed reacquainting myself with Robert Burns, yes.
Yeah, so he gave us the text, although he wasn't the main writer of the text.
Right.
He, I understand, found the text, as he put it, from an old man.
Yeah.
And this old man apparently sang this text to him, and so that's where he heard it the first time, and he transcribed it and perhaps wrote some of his own verses. They say maybe he wrote the middle verses himself.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, he was not the only one that kind of took that idea, that text, and maneuvered it around a little bit. It is definitely just part of the folk culture.
Well, we probably should start by reminding everybody what the words mean. Auld Lang
yeah.
Syne. Go ahead.
Well, should old acquaintance be forgot, that the should part for Auld Lang Syne is just for old times. It can be many things. It'd be long, long ago, remember old times, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, and the should is just like in case old acquaintance be forgot. That's what that word should is for. So it relates to all of us in a lot of ways. And Robert Burns wrote not only this because it was such an old song, it's in the Scottish dialect, the old Scottish dialect. And if you listen to someone really sing the text in that dialect, I mean, you have to look and figure out what they're saying.
It's really not understandable for us.
It isn't.
Yes.
It's hard to know that it's even English, but
and the first three, the title, the song title, Auld Lang Syne, is the remaining part of the old Scottish language that was kept so that it would have that. It's like aloha with Hawaii. It has many meanings, and so
It does.
it's hard to really put a translation on it because it has a lot of
It has a lot of them.
meaning to it.
I even read one thing that said it's like we start a fairy tale with Once Upon a Time.
Yes.
It's Auld Lang Syne,
And
it's
they
the same
did
kind
start
of thing.
fairy tales that way, and so Robert Burns didn't create that phrase. Many poets had used it previous to that. I understand they had it even into the 1500s that there was evidence of that phrase being used. So it's hundreds of years old, that idea, that for old time's sake
Right.
idea. And so lots of poets used it and manipulated it and created around it.
But I do think that he was probably the first one that wrote it down and added some things to it and put it to a specific melody, because he was a person that collected folk music. That was part of the things that he loved. And let's say, we want to say that his time frame in Scotland is about the same as Beethoven's. They were kind of contemporaries. So he was a little bit earlier than Beethoven, but the early 1700s to the late 1700s. Actually, the middle 1700s, because he only lived to be 37.
Yeah, I was so surprised by that.
Yeah.
I mean, you think Robert Burns, he must have lived forever.
Well,
you know?
how much he has
Yeah.
influenced what we think about Scotland, you would think that for sure. Do we want to talk a little bit about him now, or do you want to?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. I mean, just knowing that he's the sort of the seed of the start
Yes.
of where we get the song from, but it did have some interesting things that happened to it. But he's still at the heart of it. He's
Yes, he
still at
is.
the heart of it today in
Yes, he is.
Scotland, really. We'll talk about some of the celebrating amongst, like, what we talked about just when Barbara was coming in the door and we were doing that little tradition. We'll talk about all that in a little bit. But tell us about Robert Burns.
Robert Burns. And we talked a little bit about what a joy it was to go back to this. And I think it's because we both you grew up here. I spent most of my adult life in Dunedin and had two daughters at Dunedin High School who played bagpipes. The Scottish tradition was very much a part of our lives, and as it was yours as well. So to go back and to look at Robert Burns' poetry, and I've also sung many choral pieces that have been set to his beautiful words. He was a romantic. He was in the beginning of that romantic period. His words are in the old Scottish tongue, and so they have this beautiful lilt and just this otherworldliness about them to me. But when people recite his poetry, to me it just has such a beautiful rhythm because of the way the words are spoken. And they call him the plowman poet often because he grew up on farms, and his father was the first one that actually educated him, and that was kind of with the basic stuff. And then in Scotland at this time, the Reformation, all that kind of, not the Reformation, but the Protestantism in Scotland, the Presbyterianism and whatever, they were trying to make schools standard in the area at that time, but there were certain people who kind of broke away from that, and they called them neighborhood schools, adventure schools. So he was able to step away from the farm, and he went to one of these adventure schools, and was able to learn languages and some philosophy and things like that. But you cannot say that he is a person who was educated in a formal setting.
I see.
So he really was able to pick up most of what he had from local people and from just what he wanted to learn. And he tried to do many different things. If I were to sit here and tell you all the places that he lived and all the things that he did and all the women really that he had affairs with, it would not be very relevant to our Auld Lang Syne. However, I think of him as just a very, very passionate person. He was passionate about injustice. Some of his poetry is about that. He was passionate about love, and he was married, but he also had many mistresses, and he was just this person that had this flame inside
Well,
of him.
I think from what you told me about him, he matches the song in a way, and
yeah.
I can see why he was attracted to it, because he said that it was exceedingly expressive. That the text, when this man sang it to him, he just was so
It was probably
captivated
moved. Yeah.
by it. Yeah. It's a drinking song,
Yeah.
really. It's
Well-
you raise a drink to toast friends from the past.
That's right.
You should all acquaintance be forgot? Well, it's a rhetorical question, and the thought is that, well, no, they shouldn't be. We should remember them. And if we can, we should occasionally meet with them and remember old times.
Absolutely.
And so I think that it sort of matches his personality, that he probably had lots of friends and took that seriously. He was loyal in a way.
Well, what happened with him is that eventually someone, Colonel Brown or someone, had urged him to publish some of his poetry. He had been trying to make it as a farmer. His father never was successful with that. He was never successful. But they finally settled in an area, and he was able to make connections in the area. And this one person said, I really think you should try to, instead of moving to Jamaica to work on a plantation, maybe you could make some money by publishing some of this poetry. And he did, and it was accepted in Edinburgh. It was accepted, and so, in fact, they wanted a second volume. So he said, well, forget Jamaica, I'm going to Edinburgh, So he was just one of those persons that spent a lot of time trying to fit into some kind of a little place in his life. And probably being a poet in the 1700s was not the thing that most families wanted their sons and daughters to become, and so maybe he felt like he had to do other things along the way. But what I will say is that his poetry became very popular, and as a result of that, he taught himself a lot of the aristocratic manners and how to behave in that kind of setting. And he would be called in to be the speaker at these rich people's gatherings.
Oh.
And so he had that kind of a notoriety. And it became something that just endeared him, I think, to the whole country, really, and especially his area. But in Edinburgh, I know, Scotland, that was a pretty big place to be.
Right.
So he gained that kind of notoriety and worked at being able to be in front of people and know, and taught himself how to do that. And unfortunately, he died very young. He had rheumatic fever, and one of the things about his health, because he did move around a lot, his health wasn't very good in the first place, and he was a passionate person and probably lifted a cup of kindness, too many times, and so he aged rather quickly, and he died when he was 37. But as we both said, it's hard to believe his life was that short, because he is to many people Scotland.
It reminds me of Mozart a little bit, because he has such volume of output for someone who didn't live very long. So it's kind of it reminds me of that a little bit. But
I think in that kind of passion as well.
But Scotland's not a big place in the large scheme of the world, and so you have somebody like Robert Burns that comes from Scotland. It's huge, and so he's still huge.
Still huge. He was voted in 2009 the most important person that was ever born in Scotland.
Oh, wow. Imagine.
And this was from the people. They decided that was the case.
Well, I can't disagree with that.
No.
So we'll get back to Auld Lang Syne and how that came to, how all of us have come to know it, for New Year's. You know, we talked about the text being used by other poets and things, so it was already a popular idea, that Auld Lang Syne part of the verses. It appeared in print 2 years after his death, like his poem, in the Scots Musical Museum, but it was set to a different tune. He had put it to a different tune than we know today. He actually never knew today's tune, from what I understand. So his tune was sort of a slow, haunting tune, from what I understand.
Oh, I didn't hear that, but
Yeah,
it's very popular. I mean, possible.
Probably later, later a guy got a hold of it, James Johns. And I think I had that wrong. James Johns, he's the one that set it to a different tune. He actually was the one that printed it in 1796, just 2 years after Burns dies, and he set it to this different tune, which is what we know now, the Auld Lang Syne that we know now. So Burns never heard them together, is how that went. It comes from probably a Scottish strathspey, which is a Scottish dance. It's one of the forms of, there's jigs and different kinds of Scottish dances, and strathspey is one of them. And it's a very rhythmical, pretty forward tempo kind of dance. And it was called the Miller's Wedding, or the Miller's Daughter.
I do remember that.
I found it, it was hard for me to see the resemblance at, times. It's like any folk tune. When it's passed from this person to this person to this person, different
Changes
things
up.
are done with them.
Yeah.
So some of the copies that I found were, it was really hard to see. You could they say it's a lot like Coming Through the Rye, the folk tune Coming Through the Rye.
And thinking of both of those melodies, there's always that kind of skipping
rhythm
rhythm.
thing.
Dum, da, dum, ba, bum, ba, da, da, dum, da, da,
Yeah.
And then do, da, dum, dee, dee,
That's
da,
right,
dum.
dotted 8, 16th, and the reverse rhythm, 16th dotted 8 is what makes it Scottish, really, that type of rhythm, and gives it that Scottish flavor. And there was another guy who we think this had a big influence on how the tune got known at the time. An English composer named William Shields, and he lived a pretty good long life, and he had written, before Burns even had the poem, he wrote an opera, a comic opera called Rosina, and it was from 1782. So it wasn't long before Burns was having the poem. But this comic opera used the Auld Lang Syne melody from this Scottish strathspey. It is very much in character of how the tune would have been as a strathspey, without words. It's instrumental.
And I listened to it this afternoon after
Yeah.
you met. It's a lovely piece.
It's
and
wonderful.
at the
Yes.
end, he actually puts the drones in there for the pipes.
Yes.
As he's playing.
Yes,
As
yeah,
the
the oboe, I
winds
think,
are playing
does the drone, and the bassoon plays the melody, or vice
I know,
versa. I
it's
can't
very
remember,
cool.
but it was really neat.
That's a neat
And
piece.
so there's like 6.5 minutes of wonderful overture music, and then the end of the overture, towards the end,
Here it
has
is.
this Auld Lang Syne, and then the opera starts after that.
That's right.
It's
delightful, and it's not very long.
It is wonderful. It's a wonderful piece of music, and it's from the 1780s. And it's a treasure. Pretty rare, I would think, to hear it now.
I bet it's not performed very often.
Yeah.
Although it didn't sound too difficult, really, but it's a bit virtuosic.
It's fun. It sounded fun.
And
yeah.
I when I was listening
Some
to
of
it,
it's pretty virtuosic, actually. That flute thing that goes
oh
on
yeah,
right before
I
the
was
Auld
thinking
Lang
of the
Syne.
voices, but
Yeah.
It reminded me of Mozart. It's
It
in
did.
that late
Yeah.
classic
Mhm.
style.
I thought so too.
It's very much like one of his little comic operas.
Right, yeah.
I think.
So anyway, I think that he had probably heard this folk tune, and then he used it, and then this guy named George Thompson comes along in 1799, and he's the one that married the tune to the
His
words.
words.
Yeah. And he did it after Burns died, and and that's how. So now we're right at 1800,
Yeah.
and now it really takes off.
Yeah.
Yeah, now
Everybody.
it takes
It's
off.
hard to find people that haven't
So-
used it.
So we were talking. This is kind of a funny thing too. The Scots in the 1700s weren't doing Christmas very much. That was not a real forward holiday at all.
Presbyterian, and rather
The Calvinists.
Calvinist, austere, Protestant kind of a thing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were not for celebrating,
Poor things.
And so Christmas was kind of shoved back in the background. And so what the Scots did is they made New Year's the big deal, And so, and I guess because that wasn't associated with religion, they could just celebrate all they wanted, And so they have this tradition called Hogmanay. That's their New Year's celebration. And there's all these great celebrations that are traditions that go with Hogmanay. One of them is when Barbara came over and I let the old year out the back, and
Brought
she
in the
came
new.
in the front door, and she was my first stepper across my threshold. And so what they would do is they would clean their houses like crazy, and they would even clean the fireplaces out and do all this major cleaning before New Year's. And then at midnight they would get ready to go first stepping. And so you would take your neighbor a gift for New Year's for good luck, and usually it was a lump of coal or a batch of shortbread, fruit cake.
Gee,
Yeah, I
maybe
wonder
they're
if
the
that's where
ones.
fruit cake are the ones that started the fruit cake. We all know about that.
Yeah.
And so it was or whiskey was the
Right.
other one. It was
Which was
one
probably
of those four gifts were the main
very
gifts that you
popular.
would take.
Yeah.
And so that would be the start of the good luck, and then, but it's expanded out. There's all kinds of things that it's like a several day celebration now, and they started to use Auld Lang Syne, the music, and the Robert Burns text. They would sing it, and they would make a circle, and they would, on the last verse, it would cross their hands over their chest, and then they would reach to their neighbor and reach to their neighbor, and they would be in this circle, and they would come to the middle, and when everybody got to the middle, they would reverse the circle and come back out again.
like bringing in the new year, I think.
Yeah.
And I have a story
Yeah.
about that because in 2000, can't believe it's been that long, the Tampa Bay Children's Chorus, of which I was involved, went to Scotland for a choral festival. And we, after one of our concerts, I think it was our last concert, we were in a Presbyterian church. There were several choirs, I would say maybe 5 or 6 choirs. And we all made a circle that went all around the middle of the sanctuary. And you start out by I think you don't cross your
think you
hands.
just maybe
Yeah, you start
hold.
out this
Yeah.
way on the first verse, and then for the last verse, you cross and shake hands. And as we were singing the last verse, we were all going like this. And perhaps because of the confines of the sanctuary, we didn't go in the middle and come back, but we did certainly do that. And
Yeah.
we sang Auld Lang Syne in both verses, and it was the end of the festival with beautiful children's voices, because they're at this festival. And extremely memorable. I don't know
Oh,
that I
I
ever
couldn't
can.
believe when we talked earlier, we were sharing what we found out, and I was talking about this Hogmanay, and lo and behold, she's done it.
Yeah,
She's
I
done the
have.
dance.
It was very,
I
very
love
touching.
that.
Very
Yeah.
touching. I'll never forget it. It was really very touching.
So, so this Hogmanay is still huge, and now it's like street parades, and fireworks, and it's all the things that even we in America associate with New Year's to some degree. But some of these older traditions are still very treasured, you know, in Scotland, and so now we're in the 1800s, and all through the 1800s, the Scots just did this New Year celebration, you know, with this song. Well, they started traveling,
Yeah.
you know, and eventually, you know, enough people had come to America, the United States, and other places that this New Year's tradition started to sort of spread.
They brought it with them.
And, you know, so we fast forward to 1929, and, you know, who's on the TV but Guy Lombardo and his Royal Canadians, and that's really where it kind of got started here in the United States. Was from the 20s, the late 20s. He started doing that on TV, and anybody my age or older certainly remembers Guy Lombardo on New Year's Eve. You
Well,
know?
and I grew up in St. Pete, so after Tierra Verde was built up, they actually, you know, created Tierra Verde, and the first buildings that they put there, the resorts, there was a ballroom, dinner supper club type of place, and Guy Lombardo played on there. And
Unbelievable.
I know, and they would televise it every Saturday night. They would televise.
Really?
Yeah, and my parents used to go often and dance at Tierra Verde with Guy Lombardo.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think it came on like at 6:30 or 7 or something.
So he lived
Saturday.
here in this area.
I guess he did, but he certainly was part of that.
He's
several
from
years.
Canada, you know, I believe.
No,
but
yeah, 'cause he used to
must
call
have
him-
he must have been down here with his band, and you know, for that to have happened.
Maybe
that
it was seasonal
regularly,
or something.
Yeah.
I don't really know, but it was on Saturday night, and my parents used to go and dance.
That's such a great story.
I know.
Yeah. So, but beyond that, you know, it is used in all sorts of situations. Of course, it's used in all the Scottish Highland Games. The Edinburgh Tattoo, which is so famous,
Yeah.
closes their ceremony with it. That's
Kaylee's.
how I know it.
Yeah.
Is from playing in the Dunedin band.
Right.
You know, we had our Scottish Games every year, and we would have our military tattoo in the stadium there, and we would, in my era, I know that's not what they do now, but my era would close the tattoo
Sure.
out with Auld Lang Syne.
Yeah, and my daughters,
Yeah.
both of them, did that.
Right.
So I was part of that, going to all the Highland Games everywhere, and you know, all
Yeah,
over the place,
yeah.
and doing the military tattoos.
Right.
That's why and doing Kaylee's. I mean, if you look at that word, you never know that's the way you say it, but
Right,
with the
yeah.
Kaylee's, those are those
Which are
dance
just, they're both
celebrations.
parties in a
They're
way.
parties,
Yeah.
dances.
Yeah,
And
especially the Kaylee's more of a party.
when we were in Scotland, they had a Kaylee in one, like a little fellowship hall thing. We also were in, it was in St. Stephen's, and that's right, isn't it, St. Stephen's? Anyway, and they had Highland Games, and at that time my husband was with me. It was one of the last trips that we took, and we walked around, and it was like this could be Dunedin. They were doing
Yeah.
exactly the same things. Now they have foot races in the middle, which we don't do, but everything else that was going on, it was very, very authentic.
Yeah.
Well, Dunedin's is very authentic.
Yeah, yeah, they started it.
They started it.
We think we started it, but they started it.
And that was another reason why this is such fun, you know, to
Yeah,
go back to all those
exactly.
Scottish traditions that we really have upheld very well in Dunedin.
Well, one of the uses that moved me most about the use of Auld Lang Syne. Did you read about the World War I soldiers singing
Yes.
it? So interesting. Apparently, when the war when they got news in the field, on the line, front lines, that the war was over and that the peace treaty was ensuing, the soldiers started, somebody must have started it, somebody, a group of men or something started singing Auld Lang Syne. And the German troops on the opposing side, you know, joined with the European countries who were representing out there, and they were all singing it. And as we still have problems today not knowing the words, and so what they did, when people didn't know the words, even out there, they knew the song, but they didn't quite know all the words. So they sang it to the, did you read about this? They sang the words, "We're here because we're here."
Yeah, I did read that.
And it's just, it might seem silly at first, but if you really think about, we're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. You know, it's such a sort of an interesting thought, and you imagine these soldiers singing that song. It's kind of like a tie, you know. They all knew it, you know. By this time, it had a life that was all through the world.
Another example of how powerful music is. Yeah,
exactly.
Really.
So, but it's a great tune in many ways. It's a reflective, and it's one of the most well-known tunes of all time, really.
Yeah.
They tease that it's the best-known tune that nobody knows the words to. We know that first line though, and you know. So, but if you take the time to read all the verses, it just is about friendship and toasting to our acquaintances, and
let bygones be bygones.
Yep.
Start anew. Respect the friendship. And
right.
Be grateful for being there.
Yeah.
We're here because we're here.
Yeah. So anyway, Happy New Year's, everybody.
Yes.
Hope you've enjoyed hearing about Auld Lang Syne. We'll put some links on the end here to help you have an opportunity to hear it. We're not sure. We're going to try to find something that gives you all the verses so you can hear it, maybe in maybe a Scottish person singing it, something like that. But we'll put something on there for you to look at and hear and think about, and would toast to the new year.
Absolutely.
So we'll see you next time in the Music Chat.
Happy New Year.